In this video, I'm going to show you the basic setup of AccuLite. What I've got here is a blank database, so I'm going to go ahead and build this database. In this example, I'm going to be setting up a music room. So I'll set up the options for how I want people to sign into that music room. I'll then import students, I'll import classes and instructors, and even into some student groups, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so I'm just sitting at the main sign-in screen of AccuLite now, and I'll sign in with the ones and the new, the default admin login. Okay, so the first thing I want to check here is I'm going to look at my ID settings, and I'm going to click on Options here. Okay, so it says Sign in ID length, minimum and maximum. So you need to determine the length of your student IDs, and then you'll adjust this as necessary. For example, if your IDs are always length 9, you could make it min 9, max 9. If you want them to be between 4 and 6, you would set it as such. So it just depends on your own IDs. I'll go ahead and go with 9 and 9. Okay, I have some other options here. I can show a couple of buttons on my main screen, the Who's In, and allow people to message each other through AccuLite, so I'll leave those on. And then if I don't want to display the ID, I can mask it with star characters, but I'll leave that alone. Okay, so now I'm going to change the welcome message here. I'm going to say welcome to the music room. Okay, and then I have some announcements that I've already saved here, so I'm going to grab those real quick. And I just type these into Notepad, so I'll just paste that right here. And I want to make it smaller so I can put more announcements. Okay, so now I have some announcements here for my music room. I'll go ahead and save those. So I'll save this. Okay, so now I need to determine, I'm just clicking along the options tabs here, I need to determine am I going to allow new students or not. Now what that means is if AccuLite finds an ID that doesn't match one that's already in there for a student record, it would allow the student to enter him or herself into the database. But I'm going to go ahead and say I don't want that because I'm going to import the data, so I don't need students to add themselves. Okay, next tab is Sign Out. Now this one's important because this is what happens if the student forgets to sign out. Okay, I could give them a warning message if I wanted to. Now they'd see that the next time that they tried to sign in. It would say, did you forget to sign out? But perhaps more importantly is this use maximum sign-in period of. Okay, and mine says 2 hours. So that means the maximum period that any student would receive is 2 hours in reports. If, for example, they were logged in for 2 hours and 10 minutes, it would determine that they had not signed out, and it will give them 2 hours. So you can adjust these rules as you see fit, but I'll just leave it as is. Okay, next is my Other tab. Now, this one would be if a student is inactive. There's an active checkbox in the student screen. If you deactivate the student and they try to sign in, they would receive this message. I can maximize the screens to cover the entire window if I want to. Show screen tips. That's just yellow boxes like you see here. Update profile. What that's for is, I haven't shown you the profile questions, but you can have 10 questions that you set up the questions and the answers for them to collect additional information from the students. And then what you can do is update profile here, and when the student signs in, it will open up the student screen and allow them to update their information. Okay? And you can make these profile fields required where the student would not be able to move into the sign-in until they answered the profile questions. Okay, finally, on automatic updates, that just means if a new version of the software comes out, it will search and automatically download those updates if necessary. Okay, next tab is Activity Screen. Now this determines what students will select when they sign in. If I say do not show activity selection screen, well, that would bypass any sort of selection at all, and it would merely log their time in and time out with nothing else. Okay, but I'll leave that off. So I want to show my, my classes, my instructors, etc. Okay, here I can change the labels for what I want those things to say. So maybe subject, I might want that to say something other than that for my category. So maybe I'll make this instrument. And let's say, yeah, we'll leave it as class. That's fine. Okay, now at the bottom here I have show instructors in the activity box. Okay, now instructors are assigned to classes. Okay, and when I do the import, you'll see how that works. If I put an instructor for a particular class, it puts them, assigns them with that class, but also puts them in the instructor table. Okay, so I'll save that. And then finally the terms, so I can change terms if I don't want my students to be called students globally across the application. I could change that to visitor, employee, person, whatever. I can change subject, class, etc. So I can easily change the terms that I want the system to use. Okay, but I'll just leave those at default. Okay, so I'm happy with the way my setup is now. And just to show you here, I have no students, I have no groups, I have no classes, and I have no instructors. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is start importing data into my database. Okay? And I do that by going to Database, and then let's start with students. So I'll do Import Students, and it tells me the format here. You can see I have ID, first name, middle name, last name, phone, email, street, etc., etc., etc. So that's the format that you need for the import file. Okay. Now, if you'd like me to, I can show you that import file real quick here. And it's in my AccuLite folder. And right here, import files. So this is my actual student import file. I'll go ahead and open that in Notepad so we can look at it. But as you can see, I don't have any header or anything like that. That's not required. But what I do have is my fields in the order that are required in AccuLite. ID, first, middle, last, phone, etc., etc. Now let's look down here a little bit. You see how I have, let's look at Deb Anderson. See how it's Deb, comma, Anderson. Okay, so just like it says here, if I don't have a middle name, well, it's two commas right together. So you still need a placeholder for that data, but if there is no data, it would just be an empty comma between them. Okay? All right, so I'll go ahead and pick that file now. And that's my students. And I'll merely click OK. And it tells me that 26 users, or students in this case, were imported. Okay? And I can go now look at my students here and see that. So now I've got all of those students in my system based on that import. Okay? So I'm good there. And this ID is what the student would sign in with. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is import my classes. And remember, this is what the student picks when they sign in. Okay. So back to Database, import classes, and we see a format here. It says class, instructor first, instructor last. It also says imported records are added to a new subject called imported. Okay. So we'll see that once I show you the classes, but I'll change that name to be something else after the import. Okay, so I'll go pick my file, and again, this is classes. I'll do OK. So it has 17 activities, which are classes, were imported, and 15 instructors were imported. Okay, so let's go see those results. First, looking at the classes. And there's the subject, like it mentioned, it calls it imported, and then I have a lot of different musical instruments here. So I have cello, guitar, oboe, piano, etc., with the instructor, the professor that teaches these particular classes. Okay? So I'll double-click here on my imported, and I'm going to change that. Let's say pick instrument. Okay, so I'm good there. And by the way, if I double-click on one of these, I could edit those after the fact too, my particular classes, but I'll leave those alone. Okay, and again, I had the instructors in my import file, so it's automatically going to put them in my instructors table. So these are all of the various instructors that are assigned to the classes. Okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do is optional, but I think it'll be very handy for reporting purposes, and that's to import a student group. Now that's something new for AccuLite 6.0.2 here, so that's a new feature we've added. But groups are important because we can then run report filters on them, and I'll show you that too. Okay, so back to database, import groups, and it shows me I need the user ID and the group name, okay, which I do have in my file here, and that's light groups. I do OK, and I have 24 users imported into groups. Now let's go look at those groups, and that's right here. And I had two groups. If I showed you my import file, you would see I have music majors and non-music majors. Okay? And then the selected, these are the students that are actually in my music major group. Excuse me, these are the ones that are in my non-music major group. Okay? So that's how that works. Okay, so I have students, I have classes, I have instructors, I've set up my options for how I want the students to sign in, added some announcements, put in a welcome message, check my ID format, etc. So I'm ready to start signing in some students now. Okay, and I have various IDs, so we'll try, Misty here will be the first one. And now I'm going to return to my sign-in screen. Okay, and we can see the changes that have taken effect here. I have Welcome to the Music Room, my main heading. I have my announcements here, and it's ready for me to sign in with an ID. So I'll enter that. Remember, you can use a card swiper if you have one, but I'll go ahead and manually enter it. Okay, so now Misty Adams here is signing in. Remember, I changed that to Services, Instrument, and Class. So pick Instrument, and all of my instruments, my classes, are under that particular category. Okay, and let's say that Misty is signing in for cello with Lisa. Okay, see, it says right there she signed in. Okay, and it's waiting for the next student. Well, here comes the next one. And Stan Hall, in this case, is going to sign in to Guitar 2 with John Hurt. Okay, and you see now Stan is signed in. Okay, so this would continue, and it's tracking all this information. So here comes the next student. And Karen Jones, in this case, she's signing in because she's going to do violin. Okay, now Karen Ann Jones is signed in. And this would continue. Now remember, I set a rule that said if they fail to sign out, give them a period of 2 hours. So if they exceed 2 hours, give them 2 hours. So now it's tracking their time. So if any of those students failed to sign out, they would get a 2-hour period. But I can most certainly manually sign out. So you would direct the students, when you come in, sign in. When you leave, sign out. Okay. So here comes the first student signing out. Oops. Okay, so now Misty is signed out at 9:38 and 41. She was here for 1 minute. And this would continue. Here comes the next student signing out. And now Stan Hall is signed out. And we'll sign out the last one. Okay, so now Karen Ann Jones is signed out. Okay, so now let's go take a look at our reports and see how that works. Now, I'll go ahead and sign back in as admin, but I want to go look at my groups here for a second. Okay, so the first student, Misty here, where is she? She's not a music major, so she's a non-music major, as you can see. Okay, let's look for my threes, which was my other sign-in. And okay, there's Stan. He's a non-music major, as you can see over here. Stan Hall. And finally, my last one was fours. Okay, and that's Karen Jones over here, and she is a music major. Okay, and I'll show you how that works in my reports. So I had 2 non-music majors and 1 music major sign in and sign out of AccuLite. Okay, so now let's go to our reports here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just show visits by class. Let's go ahead and do, this is fine, the default. So let's run that report. And it shows me just what I did. Okay, Misty signed in for cello for 1 minute, Stan Hall for guitar 2 for 1 minute, Karen Ann Jones for violin for 1 minute, almost a minute, for a total of 3. Okay. Now I can export that data just as easily to Excel. And if I open in Excel directly, well, it'll show me that same report in Excel format. Then I can do whatever I want to from there with it. Okay. Now I can do visits by student, any of these reports, or detailed or summary of those reports. Okay, but let's run that same report, that visits by class, but now I'm going to say, well, I only want it for my music majors. Now that should only show one student because I forgot who he was, but only one student was part of my music major group. So now I run that report and it's Karen Ann Jones came in for violin 1 and I know that she's a music major. I do the same report for non-music majors. I should have 2 in this case. So, and I do. There's Misty, there's Stan, both non-music majors. One came in for cello, one came in for guitar. Okay, so just that easy. I set up my options for AccuLite and I did my imports and started signing in, and now I'm already running reports in just a matter of minutes. Okay?